tired of compliance talks that put you to sleep? We've got you covered. No slides, no fluff, just real-world insights from two compliance pros with over 50 years of experience. Stay ahead, stay informed, and stay entertained. This is compliance without the boring bits.
Hi everyone, and welcome again to the Compliance Without Boring Bits. And I think this time, Markus, we won't actually be using our boring signs, right? We will be talking about something exciting, report on compliance. And then
Yeah, most definitely.
but first on what have you been up to since last time?
You know, the light is getting dark. And so what I was actually doing, I was starting to put up light around the house. So just to put a little bit more like of a warm feeling into the place where I'm staying most of the time. So not really a lot of traveling, a lot of work on compliance, of course. I mean, that's my daily business. But other than that, not too much. How about you?
Well, that's a constant struggle at home with my wife because she likes to have many lights on everywhere, and I prefer to have one on the roof and just want to turn on and off. Yeah, but that's how it is. But I have been traveling. I was spent a week and a half with my teenage daughter in Japan. Not being
Really?
embarrassing all the time. One funny thing is I saw a note there as a Finn. I saw a note saying that this hotel had sauna music by the world's leading expert on sauna music. And as a Finn, I don't really know what sauna music is and how do you become an expert in it. But yeah, that is what it is.
So
But
what is sauna music now? You know,
no,
or you haven't found out?
I have no clue what it is.
I have a feeling that in Finland, the sound of a sauna is more the opening of beer bottles, as far as I remember when I
Yes, and
was
the
in a.
sound of the fire and so on. But one thing related to what we talk about here is how there was really a lot of cash required in Japan still.
Interesting.
I'm so used to paying with credit card every time, in Finland. I know in other countries in difference, but I thought Japan being such a high technological country would have more card payments, but cash was still king in Japan, even though card was accepted many times. So
It's quite amazing, but if you match that just quickly, if you match that to their development around invoices, which is close to our heart, as you and I know, it's also something that is not necessarily very regulated and has only recently been put more pressure on and more focus on to build it out into a more structured and organized way. So link that to the cash requirement, and you're getting somewhere.
yeah, I guess that's right. With the invoicing regulations, you drive digitalization at the same time.
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely, absolutely. We finally got to the bottom, we think, of this very big riddle behind the rejections of process optimizations or process adaptations, touching legacy processes. I think we found the real gem this time, or created a real gem together with the Financial Times Longitude research team, asking the actual owners of compliance, or rather the ramifications of non-compliance in the about 400 different
Yeah,
multinational large
big
organizations
companies. Yeah.
about backgrounds. Yes, we tried to get to the bottom of it, and this report is like a first in the industry, I would say. And has lots and lots of very interesting nuggets that I think you and I will discuss today, I think.
We will indeed, and I think you and I we speak a lot to businesses and the things we see, and now we have black on white. What are the things we see? Though there is one thing, which we'll come back to later, where we disagree with the report figures. Let's go into the findings, shall we? 92% of businesses intend to create a cross-functional team within 12 months, but only 11% have such a team today. And a cross-functional team for compliance means that you have AP, AR, indirect tax, IT, legal, and so on, all, managing compliance.
Yeah.
And so only 11% of the companies have that today, while 92% say they will be getting that. And even worse, only 6% say that they have central oversight of the compliance matters, that they are able to see in a central way what's happening, where are we, what do we need to do, what we need to plan for.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting finding, and if I may comment on that one just really
You
quickly,
make
because the thing is, if you look at these figures, then one, there are very ambitious assumptions in here. Like in 12 months, we will have like a cross-functional team. We will later see that others have even more ambitious figures when it comes to building actual compliance controls into their process. But the one thing that it just exemplifies and actually just shows is that for a very long time, no one wanted to touch a process that they felt within its current shape is working fine. And that is very difficult because unless you actually take time, the one thing that's going to happen is someone's going to catch up with you and then you're going to be forced. And I think this is what is happening. At this very moment, with all the mandates spreading across the world, every business is starting to run around like a headless chicken. And it just goes to show you should have done something before. Now you're forced. That's so bad, right? That's so
yeah.
bad.
Businesses love to talk to us because we always say the same thing. You need to set up this team, right?
Well, we've spoken about it, we've blogged about it, everyone's written about it, and people have consumed the content. But I think it's so difficult for people to embrace change, which is one of the things that I keep saying, and I've kept saying for the past, whatever, almost 2 decades. This isn't necessarily an IT project, it is a change management project.
Yeah,
You just need to get ready for it, right?
absolutely. And let's see what happens in 12 months. If we ask this again in 12 months, are there, 90% have they done this or not?
Yeah, that would be the interesting bit, right? Really finding out what you said here in this report as a response to our questions. Do you feel like you've advanced from there? That's going to be the very interesting part.
So another figure on the same theme is 71% say that they have insufficient visibility into clients and that this creates a major risk for the CFO. And this with risks, I want to share a story. I had a colleague of mine who's a salesperson, and he called me. This was 3 weeks ago, and he said, I'm talking to a company who are active in Belgium. In Belgium, they're having an upcoming invoicing mandate next
Yeah.
year.
Upcoming mandate.
And he says, how can I convince them the importance of compliance? They're not going to go with Basware. So I asked them, okay, so what are they going to do for compliance? Which service provider are they going to be using? And he says, no, this is not the question. They're not going to be using anybody. The CFO has taken a decision not to make any investment right now, but rather be non-compliant for a couple of months and then, look at this and you. That really surprised me because you and I really talk a lot about this, Markus, that the CFO at the end of the day has to sign the papers. And at this point, the CFO is making a conscious decision that, all right, I'm going to be non-compliant and I'm going to take the penalties, the costs, and the loss of reputation and all that.
I can still not remember ever having heard someone say that, and I'm still questioning whether that was the right way, or maybe we got lost in translation somewhere. But that would effectively be comparable to a pilot on a jet plane flying blind and switching off the autopilot and hoping for the best, right? Because I mean, these governments are putting these controls in place in order to exactly have the controls. I mean, they want to control every business transaction at one point, right? So if you're responsible for the accuracy of the data that you're supporting or you're reporting to the governments, then how can you possibly switch off all controls and fly blind? That's, to me, that doesn't resonate, and it's just testament for some things that are being acceptable. But the question is, what is acceptable, right? What is acceptable? The fines? Is it acceptable to lose reputation, to really be exposed in the market? That sounds not right to me, honestly.
But can you somehow see it, Markus? Can you see this as a, shall we say, business case where somebody calculates the fines versus the investment needed, for example, for a stopgap solution or so on?
I can't really see that, honestly, because it's from a legality perspective, and I'm not a lawyer, right? So just to be clear about it, but from a legalities perspective, if you're being found guilty of that consciously committing accounting fraud or not following the rules, then what kind of business approach is that? How can there be a business case against that, saying I'd much rather pay the fines than to do the investment to fix my process? To me, it's not good business practice. But then I'm also from northern Germany, where the merchant ship that is originating in the Middle Ages, and that's not a boring piece of information. The whole business was based on trust. A handshake was a handshake and accounted for something, right? And people were doing the right things in order to prevent the bad things from happening. And I think that should still be like the most basic principle for everyone in business. But yeah.
Well, this leads us now to the bad things, Markus. The finding number 2 here. A third of the companies responded that they have been subjected to fraud. A third have found non-compliance in tax audits. A third have paid penalties, and half have faced issues in market expansion.
And a broader figure probably didn't want to commit the real numbers.
Yeah, so this is where we kind of disagree with the report, right? In terms of this being either finance leaders not having complete visibility of what actually has happened, or not wanting to admit what has happened, right?
On the contrary, I fully agree with the report, because the report has confirmed my suspicion. Look, we're in Europe, right? In Europe, these things aren't published. In the US, you can go to various different websites and you will see those headlines, this company being fined this much money for accounting fraud and invoice fraud and all that kind of stuff. In the US, this is public. In the rest of the world, it's never public. So what the report confirmed to me is that it does exist, and that a very small number of people are willing to commit and admit that they have been victims of that, or found guilty of something, because you don't want to openly admit it, right? But just the fact that a third have said this has happened to me shows me that the potential higher number behind those people who actually said, I'm never going to admit this because that's not good, is probably just the biggest confirmation that I could have gotten from this report. And it's actually very good.
And with the cost here, we discussed the cost. There are so many more costs than just penalties, right? You have, I would classify like hard and soft costs. You have hard costs like the penalties, or your lost VAT reclaim, or that your buyers can't pay you because they haven't received a legal invoice, or the repair work you have to do because of a failed audit. And then you have the soft cost as well, like you mentioned, Markus, loss of reputation, or you're not able to penetrate the market, or you're behind the competition, right?
No, and that's true. And everywhere I worked in my career, everyone asked me, what's the value of compliance, right? And what you just described is the value of compliance, but it's so difficult to quantify it with someone who's also not willing to really look at the facts and the actual reality in their environment. Then it's so difficult to quantify the value of compliance. But all the things you've just mentioned, that's the bottom line. Absolutely.
So what's your counter? Because what we often face when we talk to businesses is that they see the investment needed as a tax they have to pay, rather than say, an investment.
I think that's one of the problems when it comes to the approach to tax technology and compliance, because too many people are just looking at compliance from a very fragmented perspective, right? They are looking at compliance just from, for example, the audit perspective. They are not looking at compliance across the entire end-to-end process, which is where the real benefit sits, right? If you take compliance seriously, then it should actually come out of the box. And it's, by the way, one of the things that Busware is trying to do, right? We are trying to make sure that people see that what they're getting from us has compliance built in, always on, right? For every transaction. But you as a customer, you need to be willing and to embrace that and consume it as such. And that means you need to go into your process, design your process setup, and also make some changes to that, because most of your process design is still based on paper invoices. Let's be honest. Scanners were only introduced to make the paper sort of virtually disappear. But they never really did a lot to optimize and really lift the automation levels or whatever. So what we are offering and what we are trying to say is that compliance is across the entire invoice lifecycle. That is where the important bit is. And if you're willing to do that, then your benefit is much higher than just to answer to a government mandate, which should be automatic anyway. And so there's a change in the mindset needed that we need to achieve. And I guess the fact that we need to be better at explaining it to the market is a key ingredient of this report as well. We need to be better at communicating what compliance really is, how it constitutes for a better future for a business, how it is the basis, the foundation for a better business operation.
But there are still situations that are going to hurt, right? When the mandate doesn't match your ERP rollout schedule, or whatever, and you have to put a stopgap solution in place, there's going to be costs related to that, right?
Absolutely, and also this assumption that if I throw enough technology at this topic, it will solve itself miraculously, like I do a SAP for HANA project or whatever, and automatically I will be compliant. I mean, I don't know where these things come from. Surely someone has said things like that, but we need to make sure that the truth actually comes through.
Well, I know where it comes from, Markus. That's somebody looking at this as an integration exercise. You just need to connect to this API and then you're done with it.
That's the point. That's the one problem that everyone has. They don't see it as a change management, as a process re-engineering project that it really is. That's what needs to change.
Let's move on to finding number 3, Markus. A third of firms said that they have fully embedded e-invoicing platforms. Nearly half of US organizations still rely heavily on OCR scanning as a critical technology. So now we're talking about actual paper or OCR, transforming something digital into analog back to digital, right? And they see this as a critical technology. And this is also something, I think we talked about this already, Markus. When I talk to businesses, I have to have a different approach when I talk to a European finance leader compared to a US finance leader, where I start. With the European one, I can start by talking an e-invoice. This is that and that. But with the US one, I start by defining what is it we were talking about with e-invoices and so on.
Yeah, I think the difference really is in the approach, right? Because you've been in the US, multiple times talking about electronic invoicing in various different scenarios, whether that's to end users or at events. You know what the assumption is. So many people in the US do not have like a distinct concept of what the invoice as a document is. And I think the common assumption that there are no compliance requirements in the US, that's the one thing that is always thrown back at me when I talk about it. And I'm like, what are you talking about?
Help the audience, Markus. What are the compliance requirements in the US? Because I remember when I started this business, I was told you can write an invoice can be a napkin that you write something, scribble something on a napkin, and as long as you store it for 10 years, you're good.
Yeah, but the thing is that there are certain bodies, like the IRS, for example, who have a vested interest in seeing what kind of document you have that supports the payment that you've made. And ever since the dot-com bubble burst and things like Enron and MCI WorldCom happened, I think since then, with the evolution of what is commonly known as SOX controls and SOX compliance, it even has it in the terminology, right? SOX compliance means that you need to be very clear about how you process your invoices and based on what are you paying. And then there is the topic of sales and use tax and all that kind of stuff. So just because people are having a very relaxed approach to this one, and there is no government law that says this is the format that the invoice needs to have, you still need to have documentation that supports all your payments and all your accounting. Otherwise, we wouldn't see those penalties handed out by the IRS to those people who are not doing the things and not archiving the business documents in the right way.
So
it might be slightly different. Let me just quickly finish this one because it's not boring. This might be slightly different from an indirect tax country where VAT is involved. But that doesn't mean that there are no requirements on the invoicing process in the US. And simply having comments from some CEOs of procurement platforms, maybe we can abolish the invoice. I mean, that's just bonkers. Because if you're a CFO in the US, you have as much headache to support your annual results and to make sure that your data comes in a structured form as you have in Europe. Just because there's no VAT doesn't mean it doesn't have any kind of rules.
So the emphasis of compliance in the US might be less on the formats and the framework and so on, and more on the processing side, right?
Well, and the data is still supposed to be there. You still need to say this amount of money went out of the bank because of this document. And then you need to have all the evidence, purchase orders, goods receipt notes. You also have to have the same kind of documentation supporting your payments. And that is what I'm always so curious about, why people think there are no rules behind it. Oh, and by the way, electronic invoicing is not new in the US. We didn't need a business payments coalition in 2006, 7, 8 when even government departments like the Veterans Affairs started to roll out electronic invoicing to their supplier base to say, please send us electronic invoices, albeit PDFs, which to you and me, that's digital paper, but it's still something that doesn't come physically anymore, so that we can pay you on time. Right? It's not a new concept. It's just slightly different when it comes to the content of that document.
In your terms, as an auditor, or sorry, in your experience as an auditor, have you seen any nasty surprises in the US?
Nasty surprises?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, nasty surprises in the context of invoices arriving and then the supplier expecting the buyer to calculate sales and use tax and make sure that all of these things are properly documented. Yes, very, very many nasty surprises. The most nasty surprise is probably if people are thinking it's enough to have something in your transactional database to show when there is an audit. Well, because there are archiving requirements in the US as well, and they are documented in the respective legal sections. So if you're a business in the US, you should read your stuff. And I'm very sure that most businesses do. But the disruption between and the disconnect between the different departments, and that goes back to the initial thing that you said, to create these cross-functional teams who are responsible for the various parts of the process is a key ingredient. If you don't do this, then one team might do this and the other team might do that, and that doesn't link up. And then in an audit, you're being exposed. And that's probably one of the reasons why some of the websites are carrying such prominent names with quite high numbers that are being handed out in penalties.
Well, let's switch on. I will go over to our finding number 4, and this is more on the positive side, Markus. Companies that are advanced in compliance and do all the things, they do better. And I'll share a figure here. So 88% of the firms that had advanced compliance, setups and really were on top of things, they exceeded the gross profit targets. And 80% of those firms really experienced fraud. And we have other figures as well in the full reports, basically saying the same thing. So there's a direct link between you being on top of your compliance and your company being efficient and ready for audits, and then be able to perform well as well.
No, and I think it's spot on. I mean, and you can probably relate to this one. You're an individual. You need to file your income tax declarations on an annual basis to the authorities. What's the difference between you not having your accounting in order versus you having everything ready and no problems creating those declarations? That's the way that I compare it even to the business world. Just because in the business world, it's ultimately much more complex. And then when you're in a multinational environment, you have many, many more legal entities that you need to consider. It's the same thing. If you have all your receipts in place, if you have all your forms filled out properly, and and you have, and this is the important part, with compliance, confidence comes stability. Because if you're not flying blindly, as we said in the beginning, if you don't have the autopilot switched off, if you have a concept whereby you're supporting your daily operations, very similarly as in your private life, then you have confidence and stability from where you can actually move forward more boldly, and you can actually work from a basis of from a solid foundation, and that's different. Of course, you're going to be more successful then.
I think you mentioned a really good analogy here, Markus, that I haven't thought about before, and that's my private life when I do my taxes. So in Scandinavia, in Finland, or both in Sweden where I lived, I would the tax government gets continuous reports on how much I paid, how much I earned, how much I paid in taxes. So when I need to do my taxes at the beginning of the next year, I simply get a pre-filled form. These are the figures to agree, and I click OK, and that's it. That's all I have to do. Compare that to
Brilliant.
the US, where there's no such framework, and you always have to keep your receipts, and you have to have a consultant helping you with the taxes and deductions and so on. So it's kind of the same thing as with invoices, isn't it? Where you have the mandates and so on, and the government knowing things in advance versus the government not knowing and asking it from you later on.
And this is a very good segue into the statement from that customer early on. So what are you going to do? You're going to accept non-compliance, but then you will be confronted in more and more countries with pre-filled tax returns. So what are you going to do? Are you just going to ignore that too? Mic drop.
Let's end it there, Markus. So the report is available to be downloaded. I'm told that our, magnificent, I'm not going to pronounce the word. Our colleagues are going to put a quiz here, and there's a lot more
marketing people.
Yeah, to be uncovered there in the report, and it's free to download. We don't charge anything and so on. So just go to the link and download it. To wrap up, Markus, we spoke about costs, we spoke about positive things, we spoke about choosing not to be compliant.
Yeah, we also spoke about Japanese sauna music, which I found the most interesting bit today, and I'm still going to investigate a little further on that one, how that actually works out.
It doesn't exist, Markus. All right, but with that, great talking to you today, Markus, and thanks a lot for listening in to us.
Likewise, and thank you very much, everyone. Come back next time. Tune in. Stay tuned.
And that's a wrap. Thank you. Join us again next quarter for compliance without the boring bits.